Hello everybody and welcome to 2C TV, your global news channel. We come to you guys with some breaking news from the conflict in Ukraine. There's a massive escalation in regards to the situation with the coalition of the willing that has been created and led by the Europeans, primarily Emmanuel Macron of France and Keir Starmer of the United Kingdom. There is going to be the UK troops deployment backed by the French. And also there is a bit of an escalation in Poland as one of the Russian drones has now hit the Polish territory for the first time. And there's some reaction to that. There's so much to cover in this live stream. We're going to get your reaction during the show as usual. Before we start, if you want to stay up to date with all our live updates, news posts, documentaries, chat forum, the podcast, everything that we have, become a member of 2CTV Plus today. Get 1 month free in your membership by joining as an annual subscriber by going directly on 2c.tv. The link is also in the description box, and download the 2CTV app, the home of geopolitical news from your app stores. All right, so we did have a relatively successful summit in the White House. Over the last couple of days, there's been some reaction to it. This was obviously led by President Trump. There was massive progress. He managed to convince Vladimir Putin and Volodymyr Zelensky to finally meet one-on-one in person. Following that, there's going to be potentially a meeting between Trump, Putin and Zelensky as well. While that progress happened, the Europeans are continuing with their own security guarantee, as they call it, which means that the United Kingdom, who is now deploying the UK troops and the UK British soldiers to help protect Ukraine's skies and key ports. Now, the Chief of Staff, Admiral Tony Radakin, is expected to now brief the American counterparts on these plans by going to the Pentagon. The deployment would include British soldiers tasked with providing logistical support, training and everything else with the Ukrainian forces. Now, Keir Starmer did mention something like this a few months ago when he was talking about the coalition of the willing. Nothing was really done. A lot of people thought, wow, he's just going to talk about it. He's not going to be brave enough, even with the backing of Emmanuel Macron, to escalate the situation by sending British soldiers to Ukraine. But he's actually doing it. So obviously there will be a lot of those who are Keir Starmer supporters who are very happy about this. But there is also a lot of other people in Britain who are slightly skeptical, saying, what on earth are you doing when we have our own problems here? And what if this actually escalates it even further? What can you do to defend Britain if something does happen? Now, I think because they believe, the establishment believes that it seems like, well, Trump is sorting things out. We can now do something to be seen as strong and stable. Well, it could backfire, or it could just not have any reaction from the Kremlin. But there is already some reaction, which we're going to get into. So the United Kingdom and France have pledged to commit their forces, both the French soldiers and the British soldiers, to Ukraine. This is to deter Putin from launching a fresh assault on Ukraine. Now, Downing Street have said, this is a quote, their leaders also discussed how further pressure, including through sanctions, could be placed on Putin himself until he showed that he was ready to take serious action to end his illegal invasion. Now, as we said, the last couple of days, we have seen progress, at least when it comes to diplomatic rhetoric from both Ukraine and Russia, that they are ready to talk. So it seems to be that they're, obviously nothing is done yet in terms of any peace deal, but they are willing to talk to each other. But France and the UK want more guarantees. How much more? We don't know. If Ukraine's skies, as they call it, or the essential infrastructure and ports get attacked, even after the negotiations, then that means the British soldiers and the French soldiers will be responsible to protect it. Doesn't necessarily mean that the British soldiers will be going into Russia. They haven't said that, but they will be helping to fight back against any sort of attack from Moscow, which would still be essentially NATO fighting against Russia directly, but that hasn't happened yet. Now, as we said, the UK's Chief of Defence Staff, Sir Tony Radakin, is now travelling to Washington, D.C., and he has actually arrived there now for the negotiations with the US officials on security arrangements. He's basically going to brief the Americans, even though the Americans under President Trump have said, we're not going to get involved. We are not sending the US soldiers to Ukraine. But obviously Sir Tony is responsible to say, but we are sending British soldiers, whether you like it or not. Switzerland, as we said yesterday, have also offered to host further peace talks. We still don't have a confirmation on the location of the talks between Zelensky and Putin. Switzerland, trying to be neutral, they have actually said, the foreign minister of Switzerland, Cassis, said that we will be offering immunity, political immunity to President Putin, because obviously there is a ongoing arrest warrant on Putin, and they said, well, if he comes to Switzerland, we're not going to arrest him. So if he's coming for the negotiations, he's safe, but only for that purpose and only if he comes to Switzerland. Now, I don't think that's going to be easily sold to the Kremlin, because they are still pushing for Budapest, because obviously Moscow, it didn't happen. It's not going to happen in Moscow. That's just a stupid idea. And it's not going to happen in Kiev either. It has to be in a third country. But we know that the idea is to push, well, from both sides, to push the other side to go with a crazy idea first to come to some sort of compromise. Now, as we said, there is an ongoing situation as well in Poland. We have a video we're going to show you. A drone, a Russian suicide drone, has crashed and hit a field in eastern Poland near the village of Oseny. This is about 40 kilometers away from Warsaw and about 100 kilometers, quite far away from Ukraine's border. Let's go to the moment that the Russian drone hit the Polish territory, a NATO member. So that was the moment. There is still an ongoing investigation on the ground as well. After the reports of this explosion in Oseny, which was a few hours ago, the Polish prosecutors have now confirmed that this was a military drone that exploded. And at this point, there is a short video as well from Oseny to show exactly what's happening now on the ground, the helicopters there, and the authorities and everybody else. There have been a few times that Russian drones or missiles have accidentally hit countries near Ukraine, and obviously the Russians always made a statement saying we didn't mean to hit your country, we were aiming for Ukraine, and it didn't, this wasn't on purpose, it was an accident. It has happened with drones a few times, but this time, obviously in Poland, it's the first time. It's not really going to be getting to any level. And the location, as we said, was the eastern part of Poland. 3 buildings have now been confirmed to have been damaged by this explosion. And the Polish authorities have now made a statement to try to calm the Polish population down after the Russian strikes obviously went deep into Poland. Let's quickly go to the Polish authorities and see what they had to say about what happened.
Chcieliśmy Państwa poinformować w pierwszej kolejności o tym, co najważniejsze. Po pierwsze, że nie było żadnych ofiar, nikt nie jest poszkodowany w sensie zdrowotnym, na szczęście. Uszkodzeniu uległy 3 pobliskie budynki w wyniku eksplozji niezidentyfikowanego obiektu, który spadł na ziemię niedaleko stąd w polu kukurydzy. To, co również należy zaznaczyć, że wszyscy mogą czuć się na chwilę obecną bezpiecznie,
Yeah.
nie ma na ten moment żadnego zagrożenia. Zostało sprawdzone i zmierzone promieniowanie. To, co wiemy na chwilę obecną, tak jak Państwo usłyszeli, to, że niezidentyfikowany obiekt z powietrza. Nie chciałbym się tutaj wypowiadać dokładnie na temat parametrów technicznych ani szczegółów eksplozji, dlatego że są od tego odpowiednie służby. Mamy do czynienia ze szczątkami, teren jest
Yeah.
zabezpieczony, wszystkie służby na miejscu pracują.
Basically, the Polish authorities and establishment don't want to make a big deal for obvious reasons. They don't want to escalate this. It has happened before, but not there. And there will be a lot of people, especially in the liberal media, who would want to make a huge deal out of what happened. I did say that this was the first time, obviously, a Russian strike hit Poland in this situation like this in this area. Someone in the live chat doesn't actually understand English, saying it's not the first time in Poland. Ukrainians killed 2 Polish citizens a couple of years ago. Despite what Putin says, Ukrainians are not Russians. Listen, we said Russian drones. First time in that area in Poland. No one talked about Ukraine's. The Ukraine's efforts or accidents or on purpose or whatever Ukraine does. So there's a whole difference between Ukraine and Russia. If Russia does something or if Ukraine does something, it's the first time, as I said. Anyway, the Foreign Minister Lavrov in Russia has now hit back at the Europeans, saying that the European Union failed to offer constructive ideas in their meetings with Trump, only pushing escalation on Ukraine. Lavrov is obviously, while Putin himself is doing the, for once, diplomatic approach, Lavrov is there to push back against the Europeans. So Putin is basically going around saying, oh, okay, Trump, I'll listen to you, sure. I'm willing to have a chat and I'm willing to meet with Zelensky. So Putin is directly dealing with the American side. Lavrov has been tasked to simply push back against any sort of European statement, any sort of European deployment of troops like the French and the UK. And that's his role right now. For the past few days, Lavrov continues to just focus on the European side, which is not a surprise. And but Lavrov aside, the Kremlin themselves have also confirmed that Putin just had a phone conversation with Erdogan to share his view on the recent meeting with the United States. Moscow did praise Turkey, as usual, because obviously they are good friends, and Turkey's role in hosting and basically trying to be mediators, especially there were some talks in Istanbul a while ago. The two of them also discuss regional stability and cooperation between Moscow and Ankara. They want to strengthen the relationship between Turkey and Russia, especially against their common enemies. Even though, ironically, the two interesting things about Turkey and Russia. Turkey is essentially the only NATO member that, despite NATO membership, Russia are good friends with. Secondly, they do technically have common enemies, apart from one. Russia and Iran are friends. Turkey and Iran, definitely not friends. But despite all this, they want to obviously push back against all the other regional threats as they see them. The relationship between Israel and Russia have been relatively good, despite the past, stable. The relationship between Israel and Turkey has been completely messed up, primarily thanks to Erdogan, despite, again, everything historically anyway. But this could obviously be the next attempt by Russia to try to get back into the region, because Erdogan did a coup in Syria to push out the Islamic Republic and Russia. Vladimir Putin took in Bashar al-Assad. Despite that, essentially, water on the bridge, let's continue because there are bigger things to deal with. So that's that relationship. Last night, we can also now confirm that another drone strike hit Ochtyrka in the Sumy region in Ukraine. They did injure 14 people in total. More than 60 drones and 1 ballistic missile were used by Russia against Ukraine in mostly the Ukrainian civilian areas, obviously. And but in this attack, no loss of life, fortunately. Now, speaking of obviously the attacks and drone attacks, because obviously there was a situation in Poland as well, the Polish Prime Minister has also decided to discuss the issue of the meeting with Zelensky and Putin. So Donald Tusk is now saying, it's not a surprise, but he opposes the idea of the meeting location to be in Budapest. He said, well, in terms of the peace agreement or anything that will happen, he said we should not repeat the fate of the Budapest memorandum. He said, why Budapest? Not everyone may remember this, but in 1994, Ukraine already got assurances of territorial integrity from the US, Russia, and the UK in Budapest. Maybe I'm superstitious, but this time I would try to find another place. So, I mean, could be superstitious. Yes, there was supposed to be assurances back in the 1990s, which they definitely got all sides to agree, including the US, including Russia, to basically leave Ukraine alone. That didn't happen. So even since the late 90s and early 2000s, there were a number of attempts to meddle in Ukraine. And but I don't think that failed because it was in Budapest. So Donald Tusk is just, he's been superstitious. In fact, you can actually, potentially speaking, have the meeting in Budapest to fix what failed in the 1990s. So you could go around and say, look, do you remember the Budapest meeting that failed? Well, it succeeded, but afterwards everybody basically ignored it. Now, the new meeting in Budapest is leading to peace. But Donald Tusk is not happy. So, and that's an excuse, by the way. He's not actually being superstitious. He just doesn't want to have it in Budapest for political reasons. All right. Now, Nina says in the live chat, Starmer is killing us. Now our boy. Can they refuse to go? We need them here. Well, they can, but they'll be punished by the military. He can't control our borders, let alone one Russia and Ukraine. Yeah. It's supposed to be, it's not necessarily symbolic deployment because it's a practical troops deployment, but it's not technically supposed to be sending the British soldiers to directly go and hit Russia, right? That's not the idea. If it escalates, then they will have to, obviously. But it's a sensitive area right now when it comes to the hot zones in the world. And one tiny mistake from any side could heat up, as it did even early 2024, late 2023, in the middle of the conflict. There's been so many moments where things could massively escalate and get out of control. It's not necessarily a well-managed conflict, let's just say, compared to anything else that we are seeing, including, for example, the war in Gaza, which is definitely much more structured and managed, which is why it's taken ages. Although we do have some update on that, as well as the IDF are now moving towards Gaza City to finish the final occupation. The auditor says that fatherless son, Starmer, will do anything to kick the WEF-mandated war to destroy and communism Europe. Communism Europe. Evil personified, although Lavrov will like it because Lavrov likes communism too. So, and Xi Jinping, he should be arrested and charged with war crimes like Blair. It wouldn't solve anything though, because there's a toxic virus of ideology in the West, in the world in general. In the West, when it comes to the Western globalists, the other side with the Eastern globalists. So you can't even arrest Tony Blair and Starmer. You could even send them to prison. You could even hang them. But it doesn't mean everything's now fine, because someone else will come and continue the same thing, because there's an issue with the political culture that needs to be addressed. As they say, draining the swamp, which is not happening. Anyway, let's have a look what we have. He cannot do this. He needs parliament and the mandate from the people for war. No, it doesn't. That's not how it works. The British Constitution doesn't work that way. You do not need the consent of Parliament. The executive branch, Downing Street, does, because it's not even Downing Street, it's His Majesty's Armed Forces. They don't need, legally speaking or constitutionally, any sort of permission. Tony Blair obviously created a political precedent by choice to go to Parliament to get a vote for the Iraq War, but that was just to make it political. They didn't need to, but he did it. And then that kind of made it difficult for the future governments to do things, because when David Cameron was trying to get a vote in Parliament to do an attack in Syria, he failed and he couldn't do anything. Constitutionally, he could still go, but politically it would have been suicide. So he said, well, I lost the vote in Parliament, what do I do? But you don't need it. Constitutionally, you don't need the vote in Parliament to do this. That's why they are just... Also, at this point, have you seen the state of the House of Commons? If you do a vote saying we're going to send British soldiers to Ukraine against Russia, guess what? They're going to vote yes. So have you seen the MPs right now? First things first, the Labour Party have the majority. We have some breaking news, ladies and gentlemen, unrelated to this, but it's against it's about the fight against the establishment. For those of you familiar with this channel, our 2CTV reporter Niak Gorbani was in court today, and he has won his court case against the police, ladies and gentlemen. So basically, the court hearing was about the case that was fabricated against Niak. Niak is obviously a reporter that we send out to the protests, especially in London, and the police don't like him. They put him in trouble. And they claim that he's aggressive with the police or whatever. So the police wanted to basically send him to prison. And he now went to court today, and I've just received the update that he has won his court case against the Metropolitan Police. Brilliant. Congrats, Niak. We will talk about that later on properly. So that's some good news, I guess, in the middle of all this. All right. What else do we have from you guys? Okay, people say congrats. Yes, obviously congrats to Niak, not me. Someone's having a meltdown saying England is an effing fake country. Wow. Well, England is a nation, but see, it's there. It's been there for centuries. It doesn't matter what you self-identify as or try to identify England as. England will always be England until Islam takes over. Then it will be Englandstan. Imagine the British army in Ukraine, migrant army in the UK to take over. Yeah, we don't have enough soldiers to take care of our borders, so I don't know what we're going to do if something happens in Britain in the middle of all this. Anthony says, as the leader of the Labour Party, he should be the first boot on the ground. Leaders lead. Yeah, back in the day, yeah, I would love to see, I mean, the photo that we have, let me just put it on screen. This is kind of funny, actually. Starmer could look good in the uniform. You know, look at him. Wait, there we go. Oh, look at him. He's loving the photo op. You know, the jacket relatively fits, almost, right? He knows how to take a photo. He knows how to stand in the uniform. But I just imagine Keir Starmer actually on the front line. I don't think I want to see that, because the whole thing will fall apart. So while people are angry and want Starmer to be the first boot on the ground, that will just guarantee the defeat of the British army. So probably not the best idea. But I do get the point. Anthony makes a good point that it seems like because of the rise of democracy over the last century, a lot of people, taxpayers and voters in democratic countries are sick and tired of the perception that the establishment are telling us that we have to use your money and your soldiers. We're going to do something somewhere and it could be risky. People don't want that. Back in the day, some countries, when they became collectivists, they could convince the people, saying, this is for the greater good. Everybody sacrifice your life, become soldiers, we're going to go kill the enemy, right? Most of the time, even for centuries and centuries, it wasn't even that. It was that the establishment would just decide, because there was no democracy really. And a lot of people will be in remote parts of the country. They don't even know what's going on. By the time they hear that there's a war and the soldiers have gone, it's been days or weeks after, and they don't really have a say. So the governments across the world just manage to do whatever they want. People think that, well, back then people were happy. People were fine with military conquest. Not necessarily. It really depended on what war you're talking about. If the French, for example, are attacking England, yes, the English were saying, yes, we need to send our soldiers to fight the French. That was fine. But if you were to, even if the British Empire, the peak of the British Empire, were going around asking people's opinion on should we go to a random place in the world, take our soldiers and take over that random island, people would have said, well, why? It really depends on where you're going from, for what reason. And a lot of people think that, oh, everybody was united, it's the British Empire. Not really. There were a lot of people in poverty who didn't get much out of it in England, for example. Sophie says, our Warwickshire MPs have stated that no other flag other than this country's flag is allowed to be flown in Warwickshire. The whole country needs to do this. Yes. I mean, especially when it comes to public buildings, you can't really have, in any country, you can't really have, unless it's for a very specific reason. For example, if there's the US delegation visiting the UK, it's symbolic that you put temporarily the US flag next to the UK flag outside, for example, Downing Street. That's okay. But you can't do it for any sort of virtue signaling or any other reason to just put other countries' flags on top of public buildings. It's just odd. What is the point of having flags? Union Jack says that our soldiers need to be put onto our beaches and stop the boats. Yeah, fascinatingly enough, the government would say, and they have said, we can't really ask our British soldiers, hard-working British soldiers, to sacrifice and put their lives at risk to do something sensitive by stopping a bunch of small boats. Because they say it's sensitive because what if one soldier accidentally drowns one of the boats and they could get into political trouble. It's a big risk, guys. You can't do that. But it's not a risk to send them to Ukraine. The idiocy of this mentality in the establishment is absolutely fascinating as well. There is, by the way, there's more escalation when it comes to the migrant crisis in the UK since last night when one of the migrant hotels was shut down, at least for 14 days. But no, not for 14 days. They have 14 days to kick out the illegal migrants. This is in Epping, Essex, which we reported. We now have the domino effect already starting. More migrant hotels will be now closing soon. There are a number of local authorities and councils who are taking legal action, going back to the same High Court to get an injunction. So the Home Office are still panicking today. Downing Street are still panicking, but it's okay because they have time to have a meeting about sending British troops to Ukraine. Now, can we go quickly to the members of 2C TV Plus? Make sure to obviously become a member to get access to our chat forum and everything else that we have by going on 2C.tv. It's down here on the screen. All right. Pork says, I'm sure Putin said no NATO troops. Am I missing something? Yeah, although, again, at the same time, Putin have said a lot of things. Since 2022, 2023, he had about 5 red lines that the West and Ukraine crossed. I'm not really sure how many red lines Putin has. But yes, it's still not really a good idea to poke the bear when you are getting close to progress and negotiations. You could have waited, they could have waited, Macron and Starmer, to wait for the progress, wait for the peace talks to get there, and then make the announcement that, okay, by the way, we're going to send peacekeeping troops. Fine. Do that. Wait for Putin's reaction. Don't do it before the talks have been even started. They think they've been clever. Did someone threaten queer Stalin's rent boys? These leaders scared the F out of me. No protection at home. Recognizing Palestine and now escalating this before the talks are finished. This is the the result of the new political advisors, the political advisors' brains in the 21st century in the West. They think they are smart, they think they are clever because they went to the top universities that have been infiltrated by the liberal virus. But they think that, well, we have a job. I work at the Ministry of Defense. You know, I'm very experienced. I've read some books about wars. I'm an expert now. So as a 25-year-old, I'm going to advise the Defense Secretary and our generals that this is a good idea. What we should do is ignore everybody else and say we should make the announcement of the troops deployment before even talks started, because this is clever. This is going to put more pressure on Putin. You've already said many times you hate Putin and his invasion of Ukraine. I'm pretty sure Putin and Moscow know that you are against him. It's quite clear. And you know that Putin is against you. It's very obvious. You've already placed a number of sanctions. If Putin was to cross an extra line, then fine, I get it. Do it. Do more sanctions if you want. Is it coming to the table? Doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be genuine. Doesn't necessarily mean Zelensky is going to be genuine. It's about the fact that they both have agreed to do it. Let it happen first. Maya, Boris built a 6,000 bed space at the Excel Center when COVID came. Why can't they do that for the migrants? Detain them in one space, process them and deport them. That's the issue. The last part is the problem. Because they know, the British government knows that they can't process them and deport them. There is a reason that the British government, the Home Office, approves most of the applications. It's because the bureaucracy that's been created and the guideline that's been created and the European Convention on Human Rights means that even when the Home Office try to reject a claim, they will fail, which means they have to approve the claim, the asylum claim, because what the Home Office usually does, they initially just reject you, and then as an illegal migrant, you go to an immigration lawyer and they do an appeal, you go to court and they win. That's because the system is built for them to always win. It's not a plot, it's just the paperwork, the guidelines that we have is now, there's a legal precedent. A lot of migrants can use the legal precedents being used for the previous illegal migrants and use the same excuses to win. Because the British law is based on precedent. So all they can do is the migrants will say, okay, well, I'm going to go to an immigration lawyer. Then immigration lawyers will go through all the historic cases from a year ago, 10 years ago. Say, okay, so you say you are now converted to Christianity. You say you are gay. You say this, you say that. And then you can't be deported. So that is the issue. Because they have to, yes, they process them, but they can't deport them. So, which means it doesn't matter where you put them at the end of the day, because they're going to come out, and then the British government will have a responsibility to give them social housing anyway, because they are now approved as an asylum seeker. They are now a resident of the UK. Even if you don't put them in a hotel, at that point, you're going to have to put them in a council house that a British person could be getting. So there's a whole wider problem rather than just the debate between should we put them in a hotel or like the Excel Center or a military site. That's not the issue. The issue is the fact that they can't even be rejected or deported unless you just change the whole system. Lisa says it doesn't matter if they evacuate the hotels, your governments will put them in your neighborhood. Exactly. They already started evacuating citizens to give housing to refugees. It will be fab soldier to what? No empathy for the stupid or evil. That's Lily. Thank you, guys. There is Barbara as well in the live chat saying, just give our lads a flag of England. Apparently they are scary. Yes. But although I'm not really sure if the Russians will be terrified of St. George's flag. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I'm going to come back, give you guys more updates about what on earth is going on with the Metropolitan Police and, of course, the situation in Gaza. I'm Maya Tusi, and we are the media.